Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Dr. Wahid, thank you, and members of the faculty of UTM. It's indeed a pleasure to be here today. To all faculty members, staff, students who are here today, some of the Duo Pharma staff here as well. It's indeed a pleasure whenever I spend time addressing universities, whether faculties or students. As part of my presentation, it's a little bit technical from a human resource perspective. But having said that, I will try to liven it up a bit by giving you anecdotal examples of how you bring to life theory into reality. I don't know whether my staff did this on purpose or not, but this photograph behind me, that's our human resource manager. He's actually in charge of human resource. And he did not get paid for doing this. But it does illustrate the point that managing people is not easy. It's a constant battle. And how you manage a factory employee relative to a supervisor, relative to a new entry graduate, relative to somebody with a few more years experience, all the way up to the direct reports, what we call DR1s, the people who report directly to myself. One of the major factors that we have to consider is how do you motivate yourselves at different levels to ensure that the engagement of people towards the company or engagement of staff and students in a university, how do you feel towards the brand that is the university, or in our case, the brand that is the company. The relationship between UTM and CCM began as a result of the faculty, CEO for Faculty Program 2.0, of which one of the faculty members from UTM was actually attached to CCM, in this case, Dr. C. Under the program, he was with us for 6 months, and Dr. C is very polite. If you do an exit interview with him and ask him about his experience in CCM, he will tell you only the best possible things. But you must read between the lines. If you catch him over a cup of coffee and you ask him to be frank, the first thing he will tell you is if an academic wants to go into private sector, you have to dumb yourself down. Money is not made by fantastic science. What is able to be sold is totally different than what can be created. You find that academics can always create better things, but that may not be what is demanded. And I think the best outcome for Dr. C from CCM, he realized how dumb he had to make himself in order to understand where we're coming from. The only difference is where we come from, we make money from what we do. And that's the trick. And the collaboration that will come about between UTM and CCM is not about CCM doing UTM a favor or UTM doing CCM a favor. It's grounded on proper commercial considerations, on gaps available within the companies like CCM, and what UTM is able to provide in terms of analytical services, etc., etc. The trick was just to understand how to position yourself in order to be able to monetize assets that you have. And you have fantastic assets. You just want to be able to monetize it in a way that suits industry and hopefully will suit the teaching faculties as well. Okay, let's talk a little bit about managing people's well-being and performance. Let me just figure this thing out first. Testing. Okay. Boleh dengar kan? Okay, you must apologize. I hate speaking from behind a rostrum. I need to move. So, let me talk a little bit about managing people's well-being and performance. And this is probably going to echo well with a lot of faculty members and as well as students. And I don't know how many students there are, either undergraduate, postgraduate, and what you can expect when you join an organization post-academia. As I said, this is highly theoretical, and if I don't give you examples, you're going to be really, really bored. Talent management is how we engage with our staff at every level. And we are driven by KPIs. So we have KPIs for everything. KPIs for how much training you get, KPIs of how much performance we expect from you, KPIs on whether you follow the more qualitative parts of it, etc., etc., etc. But you can't manage a company purely by KPIs, because there's an emotional aspect that you have to take into consideration. And emotional aspects include a lot of other things. For instance, in terms of the work environment that we create, one of our first criteria is we need to create a work environment that is fair across the board. So take for example, and I will keep giving you examples throughout my presentation, just to make it more real. CCM is a company, CCM Duo Pharma. As a company, CCM's been around since 1930. Okay? It started off as what was called ICI, Imperial Chemical Industry. So at one stage we were selling fertilizer baja, we were selling agrochemicals, we still sell water chemicals, pharmaceuticals, and all sorts of products that we've sold over the years. So the staffing level that we have, and this started even before I was the CEO. 20 years ago, 25 years ago, when I first started the company, you found there were very, very few, because we were a private sector company, there were very, very few boomies in the company. And you know why? Boomies tak suka become salesmen. That was the first problem we came across. Malays don't like being salespeople. Now, whether it's because they're overly humble or they can't accept the fact that you're supposed to make as much money as possible from your customer. So that was a big issue. So a lot of effort went in to say, okay, we operate in Malaysia. The broad guideline is the population in the company must reflect the population of Malaysia. So that's been a guiding principle for us. So as a result, 25 years hence, we've now got an organization that has approximately 60% Bumi, approximately 30% Chinese, and about 15% Indians, and 5% others. So that creates, okay, it's easy to make that decision, but it creates certain issues that we come about on a regular basis, especially in a multicultural country like Malaysia. So take for example, I want to build a new factory, right? Generally speaking, the contractors generally are Chinese contractors, and they are very superstitious lot. So when you build a building, they will put a small little toko kat tepi tu. Okay? You see it in every project. Kalau you pergi Mid Valley, you go to the bottom ground floor at Mid Valley, you see the tokong still there. And they believe that they needed to protect the workers on the site. Right? So that happens, and then post the project, what happens? Okay? Now, we've had issues in the past where some of the Muslim staff will complain about the toko. Okay? And my answer to them is fine. Kalau tak nak toko kat luar, masuk kat dalam lah. And they say, why masuk kat dalam? Because I said, that's where I put your surau. Okay, so this is the reality of operating a business in Malaysia. You have to learn to be fair across all and to be understanding about it. So when we manage people, you have to take a more holistic approach in terms of managing staff, in terms of not only the quantitative side. The quantitative yang mana boleh kira lah. Gaji you bayar has to be fair, benefits in kind has to be fair. But the more important part, the part that causes most people to stay or leave a company or an organization, is the qualitative side. the quality of life that they enjoy working, the camaraderie they get among their staff, and whether they get certain things that as a CEO I cannot control. I cannot control whether one staff will be very strict with their subordinates and whether another staff is not so strict. Okay? So given that scenario, I have to create an environment where I force everybody to at least operate on a fair basis. And this system is part of talent management cycle. So again, most importantly, is holistic, and you look at all the touch points between the organization and the individuals. And like I said, it's actually, sorry, let me just get this. It's dynamic. Huh? What you do this year may not necessarily be a good thing next year. And you have to take it into considerations. I've been in the situation where I've had to close down a factory in Shala about 3 years ago. And I put 280 people out of a job. Okay? And it was tough. And I remember some of all our sites are unionized. So some of the union staff came to see me and they asked me, boleh tangguh setahun tak? Can I delay closing down the factory by 1 year? So my response was very simple, boleh. Tapi don't expect your compensation package to be the same. Because the longer because the company was going down, isn't it? So if I don't make the decision fast, then I'm not able to compensate adequately. If I have to wait for 1 more year of low performance, then my compensation will be different. And sometimes you have to be cruel to be kind. But, you know, we put 280 people out of a job. Tapi, all 280 people, we didn't have one lawsuit. You know, and the most important part was the transparency that they found between management and the employees in the whole exercise. And this part about transparency is very, very key in any form of management. If you start making decisions behind closed doors or not prepared to explain the reason for a decision, you lose your trust of your staff very quickly. So implementation of the talent management involves very, very many parts of HR strategies. Okay, HR human resource. Those days, if you mentioned in the 70s, you mentioned human resource department, nobody knows what you're talking about. It used to be called personnel department. They will process your salary and then they will come after you kalau you clock in lambat. But human resource has grown. Now they are very much in charge of the engagement of the employee, etc. So talent management, we include process acquiring, developing, retaining, utilizing people's competencies to meet the needs of all the business of the employees. So one of the first areas is obviously acquisition when we bring somebody in. Okay, I can practically guarantee that 99% of the companies in Malaysia, including CCM Do Pharma, we buy farewell lunches and dinners. When somebody not leave, we all organize a farewell dinner. But that's the one time where you don't actually have to buy them anything. They're deciding to leave. Tapi orang yang baru masuk, we don't actually celebrate as much as we celebrate the person who's leaving the organization. So that touch point at the beginning is very, very key. One of my senior staff texted me about September. He had just celebrated his 58th birthday. And he sent me a photograph of his first day at work. And it was him, he's an Indian gentleman, rambut macam alley cats. The younger people may not know, but the CCM people will know who I'm talking about. Rambut macam alley cats, and he had a briefcase. That was his first day at work. So I asked him, where did you get this photo? And he says, at that time, Human Resource had a policy that your first day at office, somebody from Human Resource would take a photograph of you. And they just simpan. They just keep the photo. And then when you celebrate your 5th anniversary, 10th anniversary, 20th anniversary, they will always show that first day that you started. No, showing comparison will be very cruel. They will show your first day. Now, this is an example of how you keep people engaged, because what you remember is that first day. For those of you who have moved, let's say, from one university to another, you don't really remember your last day at your previous job, but you always remember your first day at every job. And that's what you need to encapsulate. So acquisition is very, very important. So when you talk about recruitment, assessment, selection, and onboarding, and I'll go into a little bit of detail. When I joined ICI, it was the personnel department, that the human resource. So the day I turned up, I went to the reception, and the receptionist says, "Yes, do you have an appointment?" And I said, "No, this is my first day on the job." She said, "Okay, I'll call personnel." So she called personnel department, somebody from personnel department came, said, "Okay, here's your card to make sure you can get in and out." And then she walked me to my desk, and then she says, "The person you're reporting to is actually traveling in Indonesia at the moment. And her boss, the boss of the department, was actually in UK at the moment. So there's nobody to do anything. Just sit at the table, and in the next 3 days, somebody will come and talk to you to tell you what to do." This was my experience, my first day at ICI those days, ICI Berhad. So I didn't start working till my 4th day, because that's when people started coming back. But I had learned most of my jobs, what I was supposed to do, from the clerk, who was, masa tu masih ada clerk, masih ada secretary. So this clerk and the secretary were the ones who told me what they thought my bosses wanted of me. So there was no onboarding at all. It was basically throw you in the deep end of the pool and see whether you survive. Nowadays, things have changed tremendously. There's a lot more razzmatazz about your first day. The last thing we want is for staff coming in on your first day and spending the first half isi borang. That's very common. And in this day and age, all these borangs you can send to them before they join the organization. So when they come on board, they feel as if they're part of a family rather than come on board and neither company nor the individual knows what to do with them. Then once you're on board, we then look at development, training and competency, coaching, mentoring, and performance management. I'll spend a little bit more time on performance management because this is one area that a lot of people have told me is not suitable for the Malaysian culture. But I'll show you how we adapted it to make it more suitable to the Malaysian culture. You then, once people on board, you've got your KPIs, you're evaluating them on a regular basis. It cannot be just the KPIs that manage. Then you have to look at the work-related, social, personal. This is where you get engaged with the staff. Very, very key. Now this is where the work-life balance comes in. Okay? Just now over lunch with my staff, I was saying, my CFO, he always says, "I give you work, therefore you have life." So what are you talking about work-life balance? The fact that you're working, you're balanced already. Okay? A little bit old school, but it shows to you how some people think about work-life balance, especially when it comes to the millennials, Gen Y. There are different requirements, and it's all phases. I am sure when I started work, although it's easy for me to complain about Gen X, Gen Y, etc., millennials, I'm sure when I started work, the people who were older than me, they didn't have a label for us. We were the Gen tak ada label. But I'm sure they felt as unhappy about us at that time as well. It's just that they didn't actually be verbal about it. So work-life balance is very key, and we'll touch a little bit about it later. Then comes the issue about how do you retain a good employee? Career development, mobility, this mobility is actually very key. Easier to say, harder to do. So an example would be the CEO for Faculty 2.0 program. That's a classic example where you can actually move somebody to get a different dimension to enrich the person's experience. And of course, succession planning. The ability to be able to make sure that if, for instance, I get now knocked over by a bus leaving UTM, there's somebody to take over from me tomorrow. All good companies will have a proper succession plan. It may not be 100% perfect, but at least it gives you a platform. So basically, the goal of talent management is to engage and motivate. Okay? Where it becomes complicated is not at the lower levels. It becomes most complicated when it comes to engaging and motivating somebody who's reached the pinnacle of their achievement. Yeah? I suppose in the example of a university, if you're dean of the science faculty, you've reached the pinnacle of your academic life. How do you motivate yourself? Self-motivation is one part, but what can the organization do to motivate you further beyond what you do? So some of the things, I'll give you an example, some things I do in CCM. Every member who becomes a group management committee, that means reports directly to myself, must go through the Harvard Management Program. Now, I don't care that you've got nothing to do with marketing and sales or commercial side, but I insist that that becomes an entry-level requirement. So if you join the GMC, you're promoted to that level, the first thing you look forward to is you go to the Harvard program. Okay? But we're not so wealthy that we send them to the Massachusetts faculty. They do it in Malaysia, so you end up going to Bani, which is not too bad, but still has the content, program content. The other thing is, I like, in my KPIs for my direct reports, involvement in third-party activities, I recognize. So katakan, as an example, somebody spends a lot of time doing CSR work in an orphanage, or somebody spends a lot of time doing work in a mosque. Somebody spends a lot of time volunteering for industry associations. These are things I recognize in the KPI for the bonus purposes to make sure that it's more holistic the way I evaluate my direct reports. It's not only about what you achieve at work, it's peer recognition, which to me is also very important when you get to that level. So, performance management, this is the one that everybody hates. This is where you do a KPI, they do a weighting system, and then tell you that you're not as good, even though you tell them it had nothing to do with me. The economy changed, there was a change in government, etc., etc., etc. But I'm still held accountable for it. And this is what. So one of the things we do on performance management is the concept of bell curve. I don't know, a lot of you may not really understand, but the concept of bell curve is that, scientifically speaking, most of us are average. No matter what we think of ourselves, we're average. Okay? So we're the middle of a bell curve. You have one end of the bell curve of those who are very, very good, and the other end of the bell curve, those who are not so good. Okay? That's natural if you just do the statistics over a large group. So generally, all will be, so, we have problems of one, you can even use this, apply this to markers of exams. One guy who's very, very strict, and another guy who's not so strict. So how do you manage something like this? It's actually quite straightforward. You apply the bell curve down to the individual. So when he evaluates his staff, I want to see a bell curve. And the next person, all give me a bell curve. So by the time I agglomerate the bell curve, I get a normal bell curve for the entire company. So I don't care how lenient a marker are you, I don't care how strict a marker are you, as long as you give me a bell curve, because one of the major things you have to realize, human resource is not about the company or the human resource department. it's about the manager or the lecturer or the dean, etc. Is that you have the responsibility to manage the people. The company can only give you parameters. It's up to the individuals to actually market. So the way we do performance management, we decide on our targets by November. By December, the board approves on the targets, and by January, all the staff will know what their KPIs for the year are. It's actually quite a standardized process. So in terms of performance management, this is the technical, they use what they call the PDCA, planning, SMART, what is a SMART goal, doing, monitoring progress, review and assessment, reward and recognition, and it starts all over again every year. Yeah, that tends to be the academic, or rather the theoretical basis of the performance management system. So for those, a lot of you who want to go into private sector eventually, you will be assessed on an annual basis. So you can be very good this year and not so good next year. But I always tell myself I've never cared, because statistically speaking, we're all average. So I don't care. When I get the really high recognition, I see that as a bonus. The next year, tak dapat so high, I say, okay, tak apa, I'm average. I work on the following year. So the main thing about performance management is feedback and support. Now this is one of the areas that we as Malaysians always have problems, the feedback portion. And this is where a lot of people tell me that performance management is not ideal for the culture in Malaysia, because we are not very good about giving, or we're very good about giving good feedback. We're very bad about giving poor feedback. But that's a skill, you learn that over time. And something that this performance management doesn't work if all you want to do is give good feedback. It has to be constructive feedback, irrespective good or bad. Of course, this leads, the performance management benefits organization and employees, both to good performance and also poor performance. So, how do you manage a person's performance? It all falls back to feedback and support. We've had situations, we have a guideline, kalau you fall low on the bell curve for 2 out of 3 years, you go into what we call a performance improvement plan. When you go into a performance improvement plan, you have regular feedback sessions, whether we evaluate whether you will survive or not survive in the organization. And this is actually very key. And the better the feedback process, we've had people who've dropped for whatever reason, and some of it could be personal problems. Performance has been very, very good, tiba-tiba family issue, performance dips for 1 year. And then now is the way, and the mentoring, you try to bring the performance of the individual up. So it's very individualized, and it's important that the managers are trained about engaging and motivating. You'll be surprised that how well you engage and how well you motivate an individual can be extremely powerful. If you work in the private sector, one thing you will notice, because we get so many applicants of jobs, so HR will say, I cannot go through every application. I will just go, through the CGPA of kalau 3.5 and below, tak payah apply. Okay, that tends to be what a lot of companies do. Tapi when I sit at my management, the people who run this company, and I ask them, how many of you got 3.5 and above? Tak ada orang nak angkat tangan, Remember I say everybody average, kan? So we apply standards, but it's not borne out by statistics. That is only those who get 3.5 and above who are successful. Okay, and that's why, like I said, to me, whatever results you get is to get into the door. Once you get into the door, it's up to the company and the manager to mentor and motivate you to be the best that you can. And that's where you really see the benefit of the ability of the individual. Oh, this one mati dah. Yeah, locked. Can you just change the page? So employee engagement programs are extremely key. Employee engagement programs is one area that we in Malaysia do very well. Next one. Next. Okay. Next one. So employee engagement has become the buzzword in performance management. This is, we measure how engaged the staff are on an annual basis. Previously it used to be hard copy, now we do it electronically. So around about December every year, all the staff will be given a survey and they have to fill in a few questions, which we then determine how engaged the staff are. Another way of looking at this is how possible is that staff going to leave the company in the next 12 months. Because if you have a very high turnover rate, then programs will not be successful. So we want to measure how passionate they are about the job, the commitment to the organization, and willingness to put discretionary effort into their work. So employee engagement doesn't necessarily mean employees are satisfied, okay? Because satisfaction does not address passion, motivation, and commitment. So we believe that it's the engagement of the employee that really drives performance. So the Harvard Business Review surveyed 568 executives at random, and 71% actually said engagement is the main reason for a company achieving organizational success. But only 24% of companies actually identified the company employees as being engaged. That means they feel an affinity towards the company. In the case of universities, how you feel towards UTM as a brand. So there's many types of engagement: job-related, social, personal engagement. In terms of job-related engagement, it's basically partially driven by KPIs, clear understanding of their contribution, whether the goals and strategies are communicated. So for instance, we do 4 times a year, we do a town hall with our staff to tell them where we are, how we're doing, the good and the bad. It cannot be just the good, where things have been delayed, etc., and what's going to happen in the future. So nobody reads about their own company in the newspaper. That's more or less the standard that we follow. No staff in the company must read about the company from newspaper. So we make sure individual targets are aligned, programs for learning and development are designed around corporate goals and employee competencies, and of course rewards and recognition for high performance as well. So some of the things we do, like I said, town hall sessions, the management team, we have 6 core values, and by coincidence we have 6 management committee members. So each of them, including Ms. Sui here, heads one of the teams in the organization. So the sport club organizes it, so there's a red team, blue team, etc., all based on core activities, and each of them head it. And of course, during the town hall, we show the which team is winning, which team is losing, and then at the end of the year, we have an award for the team that wins. Membership of the team is based on from group MC management committee level all the way down. Whoever's a member of a sports club can participate. So in terms of social, we do quite a lot of CSR activities. We organize team building programs, health and sports related activities, intercultural engagement, so we celebrate all the festive seasons, and employee management get-togethers, annual dinners, breakfast with myself, etc., etc. Again, just to break down barriers within the organization to make sure they feel more engaged with it. Because if you look at it, Umar, if you compare it to your house, you know everything that goes on at home. So what we're trying to do is to give that sort of sensation to the employee that they know about what's going on. Now, for a company like CCMB, it's easier. For a university, I imagine it's huge. I mean, how many students do you have? 22,000. Belum masuk faculty lagi kan? So you've got huge. So this is one of the biggest challenges, to get people to feel engaged to the institution. So some of the social activities, like I say, we do an annual dinner, we do sports carnivals, we do hiking activities, and some of them are self-motivating. The staff organize it themselves, then request for funding, which we give every so often. So in terms of social, we do a majlis buka puasa, Every festival, we do a festival decoration contest, so apologies for the typo, and we do CSR activities, etc. So we try to engage the staff at multiple levels within the organization. And of course, personalized and flexible benefits. So this is a new thing that's happening within the industry, that a lot of people want to have flexibility of benefits. I'll give you an example. One of what we call the bonus benefit of CCM, if you die on business, the insurance policy pays you out 13 years last drawn salary. Okay? Don't know how it came about, but over the last 70 years it evolved. We got this insurance policy that says if you die on business, you get 13 years your last drawn salary. Not you, like you're dead, but your relatives, etc. So some of the younger staff, I'm not going to die, or not yet. Huh? Why would I want that? Similarly, we provide medical coverage. Not say unlimited, but up to about 20,000 per employee per year. So some of the younger staff will say, well, that's not going to benefit me because I'm young, I'm healthy, I'm not going to use that benefit. So why give it to me? It's almost as if you're putting something that I won't use, and then you're calling it a benefit. So we've had to change our benefit system to be more in tune. That means it's like a menu. So when you come in, you can decide, okay, maybe you don't need 20,000 insurance coverage. Maybe you only need 5,000. But what do you do with what the company saves? It doesn't come back to the company. You can opt for other benefits that may be more relevant to you given your life cycles. So this is something relatively new. It's not easy to do, and HR people hate doing it because it involves a lot more management. Standard form is always the easiest, but you find the standard form formula doesn't actually motivate. Because we do little things like greeting cards to employees. Now this has become very cheap, and now you just get an email, a happy birthday. But it's a nice little touch. Flowers, well wishes to employees for hospitalization, delivery, death of family members, etc. We arrange fund collections for employees, immediate family members. Just bear in mind, some of these things that we do as a way, because our engagement score at CCM Duo Pharma is one of the highest in the industry. Not just pharma industry, it's one of the highest in the entire industry in Malaysia. But we've only got 1,500 staff, so it's easier to do. Okay, so be aware, sometimes when you see presentations and you go, oh, kenapa UTM tak buat macam ni? But you have to be careful. This is for smaller companies, senang cakap lah. But it does work, and the HR is perpetually looking at ways to actually improve engagement among staff. So things like hospital for flowers for staff that have been hospitalized, we do greeting cards, we do fund collections that we give to staff in need. Staff in need, like I said, one of the things we do, because each employee is limited to 20,000 in terms of the coverage medically. Those of you who are in their 50s will know kalau satu scan dapat RM40,000 lah. So 20,000 is not enough. So what we then do is get other staff to contribute to try to top up that 20,000. So this is where I say trying to keep that family environment. So in terms of engagement, you've got the job engagement, social engagement, so you have engaged employees. The theory is to improve performance, improve productivity, improve services, and therefore better revenue. Okay, this looks very well. Now I'll tell you a story, the opposite. I was once running a company in Nilai, and I looked at the turnover rate of the company. The turnover rate was 0. Nobody left this company in Nilai. Okay? Everybody was so happy and engaged, and it was actually unhealthy. Because you have no infusion of new ideas, that's the first problem. But you have a major problem. Kalau people leave, your salary cost over time becomes too high. So somebody joins as a, just a general worker, okay? Doing a simple job, doesn't require a degree, doesn't require education. he comes in at minimum salary scheme. Because it's unionized, every year the salary will naik. If that guy doesn't leave, you put 30 years worth of increments, unionized increment on that individual. By the time he's 50, you're paying him probably 4,500, and his job still remains lifting barang. No company can afford that. That's the reality of the situation. So every company requires a turnover. So you want engagement, but you want logical engagement. You don't want to be so engaged that time that one will leave the company. Then you have a major problem in your hands. You cannot afford the salary level. That's the reality of the situation. So while all this is good, you also have to do your performance management well. Because if people are too engaged and they're not leaving the company, then you have to exit individuals who are not performing. Because the biggest destroyer of motivation is a staff seeing somebody else who we are not taking action even though we know the person's not doing their job. That's one of the biggest destroyers. Because the good performer will say, I killed myself and my increment to 80 ringgit. And the guy sitting next to me turns up late, goes back early, and he's dapat the same increment as me. Why should I contribute? Why should I really dedicate myself? And that's one of the biggest issues. You don't see it at the operating level, but at the management level you see it. And then it can be a great disincentive for employees. So in summary, engagement is key. Although as I said, do it, but if you're going to do it very, very well, then make sure your performance management works very well. So employee engagement benefits your organization, talent, succession pool, corporate culture, and business outcomes. So with that, thank you very much. I hope you found it interesting. I know it's a very dry subject, but you'll find that when you go into a supervisory or leadership position, you will come across a lot of these things. And how you manage it will dictate your potential success, because the better you are at managing this, the better your talents will be recognized for upward mobility. So with that, thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.